Hi, we're here at IBC 2022, and I'm here with Chris Carr, Chief Marketing Officer for Videndum Media Solutions. So, Chris, how's your breakfast today?
Breakfast. We've been so busy. Breakfast is a breakfast meeting. We're then seeing customers, and then there's further meetings at dinner. So it's been great. It's been busy.
I have a weird question. So we're seeing a lot of the media industry being commoditized. First it was sliders, then it was LEDs. Now we're seeing everyone is coming out with microphones. What do you think will be the next category to kind of like go down to everyone?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess it gives a little bit of insight into our strategy as well. But products in and around creating content for the metaverse will be the area that starts to move something. We've seen virtual reality previously. We've seen audio in a spatial sense. But actually not to the degree we're going to see it in the future. Because as those lines blur, the metaverse will demand content for us that is more than what we're seeing today. So for me, that's the big area that's going to drive us, maybe not today, maybe not in a few years, but in 5 to 10 years, that's when it will start to impact us in the biggest way.
So when you're saying metaverse, is this the thing that we're seeing where everybody is just sitting in their couch wearing those special goggles? Or do you think it will have this impact us in a different way?
I think there's lots of people using the metaverse in that what you recognize of it as Ready Player One, the kind of thing from Steven Spielberg. You recognize that, and that's the easiest way to understand it. But for us, it's more than that. It's more than that. It's the ability to go to a ski resort that's been replicated digitally in the world without having to get on a carbon plane and have that experience, but visually and sensually, and have the audio that was all replicable in that scenario. So it's more about the digital reality blurring with the physical reality. There's no true definition of the metaverse yet, and there'll be metaverses, but the blurring of it is how we take it as moving forward. We will spend more time of our lives in the digital world than we do today.
I think as Videndum Media Solutions, you have a very high vantage point. I mean, you're dealing with almost every segment of the supporting the imaging industry, and from that high vantage point, where do you see the industry going in maybe 5 or 7 or 10 years?
The industry? Well, I think the industry's quite lucky where we are at the minute. What we've just been explaining, we need to replicate the physical world with content. That's fantastic. But we need to speed up the workflow for the end user. And that's something we do very well with our Compose brands and Wrap It Round. But if you go to the Canon stand today, you'll see as many PTZ cameras than you do the traditional sensor cameras, because they're applying that robotics and that automation to speed up the workflow for people that are creating content. That's because the demand for content is so much increasing and will continue to increase and rapidly increase. That's where the industry will change. And those people with the user at the center of what they do and the center of their innovation will move forward faster than anybody else. So it's great for our industry as we sit today.
And maybe touching a little bit about this user-centric idea, we're seeing a little bit of a shift between having dedicated crews and dedicated professionals that are creating content to a world where everyone is creating content. And I was wondering, what is your take on that?
Do you know, Casey Neistat made a video about 4 or 5 years ago saying filmmaking is a sport. And at the end of that, it talks about the fact, and I always look at this video and show it to some people when we talk about content creation on smartphones, because what it's enabled is people to make content creation from the product they've got in their pocket. I went to school to learn about photography. I'm a trained black and white printer. I've done studio photography. I worked in all those different fields to start at an entry level to create that content.
That's a pretty heavy price to just get started.
It is. I had to do a physics qualification to be a photographer. That's not the same today. People have an iPhone in their product or a Samsung phone or whatever device they use, and they can actually create content, which is brilliant for us. There'll still be the film crews. And the great thing is, these people are creating content without the laws that we have been taught, without the education we've been taught. It's not about composition, use the rule of thirds as we were previously. These people don't care. They are creating content which is great for them, and they're breaking standards of the industry, and that's moving up to the professional industry, and they're going in to actually make films, and they're making money from it, and they're growing. So we've got more people making content, which is, you know, fantastic for all of us in the industry, and that's why I think the show is so popular this year, because it's not just about, you know, the gaffers or the directors of photography anymore. You've got other people wanting to learn how to make better content, because in that monetizing world, it's becoming more and more competitive. And what do they need to improve? First of all, the talent, but second of all, the content visually and audio, which is fantastic.
And you know, maybe hand in hand with that, we're seeing that marketing is also changing, moving from, you know, big campaigns and big printed ads into influencer marketing, where everyone can actually exercise and sell products. So I wonder if you see the industry shift in that regards as well.
I think people today only have a certain amount of time, and they want content that's completely authentic. And to be authentic, you need to be somebody that's doing it day in, day out. We can no longer talk about the glamorous nature of a tripod or how a bag looks and things like that. We need to put it in the user's hands and for them to tell the story. We design it for the user. It's only right for them to actually tell the story on that way through. So yes, a lot of our communication and our content is being created by our users. And it starts with the innovation and the design of the products, which is great, because when you then see them using the products later and you know they've had a hand in developing it, that's magic to us, and that's when the product really sells.
And you know, with more people creating content, as you say, and you know, using it, and with COVID behind us and shipping challenges, how do you feel the industry is coping with the issues on the supply chain?
I think supply chain issues, frankly, even outside of our industry, it's almost impossible at the moment. But the industry is coping well. You know, we're starting to see a lot more cameras back in the market, which is great, because obviously that's a starting point. So we're seeing a lot more cameras out in the market, a lot more availability. I think towards the end of this year, we'll be over any of the previous supply chain issues. For us, actually, we've got a great team, we foresaw, and we've got great relationships. And actually, we bought forward to make sure we had as many raw materials as we can. Of course, we get caught out with one-off products here and there, but we invested significantly to go through that period, and it's worked very well for us and our partners.
And then I know that you've shifted some of your factory locations, right?
Yes and no, actually. We have our factories in Italy. You know, it's still one of the best kept secrets that we make all of our products, all of our support products, our Manfrotto products, are made in Italy. And we've got 5 factories there, and they're still thriving, and we've had to increase them both in equipment and people more than ever before, because the industry is in great shape. But then we've done a number of acquisitions, and we've not done those acquisitions to consolidate manufacturing. A number of those acquisitions have happened because of the skills in manufacturing, and therefore they will remain where they are. So if you look at the Audix brand that we bought in Portland, Wilsonville, just outside of Portland, fantastic brand, but we bought them because their capabilities in R&D innovation and manufacturing. So that will stay there. We will not move that. The magic is happening there, and we will actually bring more products from a microphone perspective to be made in that location, and that will become our centre of audio excellence. In the same way, you know, we take the paper for Savage, for backgrounds, from mills in America. It's converted in Phoenix, where it's very, very dry because it's the desert, and then it's moved forward. That will not move. That's a logical and sensible piece for us and our customers, so that will not move equally. So we do have numerous factories now, and we do have numerous locations around the world, but that's by design. That's by design and by competencies, and we don't want to lose those competencies. We won't be changing them.
You know, speaking of Audix and Savage, and you know, going back to maybe 2017, Lowepro and Joby, and you know, and the Vita Group as a whole, Quasar Science. So I'm wondering, what is the overall arcing strategy with all those different acquisitions? Where does Videndum want to be?
Videndum now wants to be in a place where we help the end user. So if you look at the backgrounds, for example, this studio that we're sitting in today that you've taken over, which is great, this studio that you're sitting in today is actually all of our Compose brands. And we are helping the end user improve their workflow in composing. We had the lighting stands, we had the microphones, we had the support, we had the sliders, we had the lighting reflectors and grids and things like that. But paper was a natural adjacency. So we will continue to look for adjacencies in that sense, because backgrounds fit perfectly with the rest of the equipment we're selling. We're not going to buy a camera company, but everything else is under Videndum, and that's where we're helping that content creator.
I think you've almost answered my next questions, but I have to ask, does Videndum have any plan to go into the actual imaging industry, maybe via action cameras or some other form of actually producing something with a sensor?
We'll never say never, but we're camera agnostic. We know what we're great at. What we're great at is supporting lighting technique, is capturing amazing audio, is actually helping support and the best stabilization in the world, and wrapping it in fantastic carrying solutions. Cameras is not, or sensors, is not a competency we have. But that camera agnostic piece means that we can be in every relationship. Canon will have a relationship with their content creator. Sony will have a relationship. Apple will have a relationship with their separate content creators. And we all have our preferences. You'll either be a Canon, Sony, or a Nikon user, and I won't ask you to state it on camera. But we have, and we're in the unique position where we have the ability to speak to all of those content creators. We're the only people that can meet Steven Spielberg as a child and still, support them when he's making massive movies later on in life. That's very important to us. So will we define ourselves by going into more of the sensor part of the world? A, we don't have those competencies, but B, we love what we do in supporting the whole industry and the content creator as a whole, and that's very precious to us.
And I definitely understand that, and I see this whole, hugging and very embracing strategy. One thing that I think is that I have not seen Videndum doing is really tap into the LED industry. I mean, there's a little bit on the production side of Videndum, and Joby has done a few things, Manfrotto has done a few things, but as Videndum Group, I haven't seen you leaning strongly towards tubes or COB lights. Do you have any plans going in that direction?
In the pro space, obviously the guys at Light Panels and Quasar Science, they have some absolutely fantastic products there. In the entry level space, we need to offer more than the LED on its own. So we need to offer a reason, and LEDs are a big part of our ecosystem. So for example, we don't necessarily do a full range of everything today, but the products we do are very specific. So let's take, for example, under Joby, for the content creator that's got a studio like this at home, they also need to create Instagram stories on the go. So we've created a product that slips on the back of their iPhone, it flips up, it connects to the MagSafe usage and creates that light with a mirror giving them their visualization as well, to actually enable them, whilst they're moving, to still monetize their content, which is what they need to do for day in, day out and everything else. So specific LEDs for specific purposes in the ecosystem, which, and giving you a little bit of an insight here, will be wrapped up in an app that we're releasing that will help them across their ecosystem and their content that we'll release later on in the year. I think for me, that is where we'll use LED. But not just because we need to create lights. I think that we've got some fantastic pro brands that do that. But when we innovate, we need to innovate for a reason and for the user. And that's where you'll see LED more from us.
And then I have a question. Maybe you can help me figure this out once and for all. Gitzo are making tripods, Manfrotto are making tripods, even Joby are now making a little bit of a tripod. So there's a situation where they kind of bite into each other product lines. And so I was wondering, how do you see those three brands interact with each other?
Do you know, that's a great question, actually. The user is very, very different. The user is very different, and this is internal language primarily, but it might help to frame my answer. So we have three sections of users: those that are framing, those that are composing, and those that are creating. And if I could just capture that a little bit more in definition, if you got a minute. So Gitzo, for example, Gitzo is the perfect companion for that person that's capturing what's going out there in the world. So if you go on Safari, you're using a Gitzo tripod, and what you're doing, you're framing what is going on around you. And Gitzo is designed and innovated because of that, and we're designing towards that user more and more and more. And that user is giving us feedback, and that will help that development move on even further. Manfrotto, on the other hand, whereas on a set, and when you take a picture, the framer is going and they're planning their trip, but the capturing of the action is live. Manfrotto, on the other hand, is composing that. So if you think about a studio scenario, if you think about the photographer today, they're no longer behind the camera. A photographer's biggest job is composing what we see here. When we set up for this film set today, we took some time setting it up, framing it. You're sitting in one position, we've got microphones. That's composition. And that composing user, that's what Manfrotto is all about. And plus with Manfrotto, we're seeing a lot more video and photo crossover than ever before. So we need to be able to cater for that in that way. Whereas Joby is very different, very disruptive, as we were talking about before. The Joby user is not behind the camera. The Joby user is both the actor and the filmmaker and the audio engineer in front of the camera. So what they need something to be able to cope with that workflow. They need to be able to turn it around, be able to stand it on strange objects, wrap it on a tree. They need to be able to hold it on a skateboard. That's where the Joby user is going. And we put those three different user groups at the center of our innovation to move it forward. So that's how it splits. There's obviously an obvious answer in a corporate world, and therefore it will need to sit separately forever. We have no plans to merge those brands or anything else. They will need to sit separately because the user is separate.
Speaking of Manfrotto, which is kind of like the middle, maybe between the higher Gitzo and the more creator-oriented Joby, we're seeing a lot of folding of brands into Manfrotto. So Lastolite, SERP, all of those are now becoming Manfrotto. Can you explain us the motivation for this?
Again, it's all behind the users. Let's take Lastolite, for example. When we bought Lastolite was a brand that was perfect for wedding photographers around the world. And we were using reflectors, we were using large reflectors and backgrounds for studio photography and everything else. But the users started to change. The users started to go, I'm not just a wedding photographer anymore. I'm also doing the video. And I'm also doing this content. And I'm also doing this content. And they're composing with all those things around them. So to enable us to help that end user more, what we've done is we've brought the brands together to have a similar tone of voice where they fit around the user to be able to complete that ecosystem of products. We don't have any plans where the user is very different. It's only where they sit around those different three areas that we've looked to bringing those together.
Maybe Manfrotto being a one-stop shop for all the needs of that certain individual or certain photographer or videographer.
Yeah, absolutely, but not necessarily a one-stop shop. In fact, we've exited over the last 2 years, which you may not have seen, a number of categories, because actually those categories weren't at the heartland of that composing area, and that's what we're focusing on. So when it's relevant to composing, it'll be very much targeted at that Manfrotto space.
And so what does that Manfrotto space mean when you're saying, like, what goes in, what stays out?
Manfrotto is, let's say, the professional's workhorse. That's the brand where Manfrotto exists. And frankly, all the products that's sitting around that workflow of that professional are very much at the heartland of where Manfrotto is. We'll still have other brands that fit in with that, and we'll use our similar language to cross those bits over. But that professional space is where Manfrotto exists the best in both photography and videography. So that's where that will exist.
Dan, thank you so much. Just before we wrap up, there's a short game. I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions.
Wow, okay.
If you can answer, don't think about it too much. Just go ahead and shoot the first answer. You can pass if you don't want to answer, but you know we'll put a little black dot if you pass.
Oh, okay, so, okay. Wow.
So, dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Zoom or Prime?
Prime.
Coke or Sprite?
Coke.
For daily use, mirrorless or phone?
Daily phone.
Canon or Nikon?
Oh,
I'll let this one slide.
both. I actually have both camera sets.
Pineapple on pizza?
Definitely, but don't tell my Italian colleagues, please, please, please.
Coffee or tea?
Neither. Coke.
Portraits or landscapes?
Oh, portraits.
Last one, Instagram or TikTok?
Instagram.
Dan, thank you very much.
Thanks.
It's been a pleasure being. We've took over the Videndum booth. Thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for all the insights.
Great to see you, and thanks for the time.